Hello and welcome to the CinemATL Podcast. The CinemATL Podcast is a weekly podcast that examines the world of entertainment through the lens of local Atlanta filmmakers. That would be us, your hosts. I'm Michael D. Friedman, and that is...
Martin Kelley.
And this week it's the return of the technique topic. Woo! Yes, this week we'll be looking at 5 top tips that we recommend when making a short film. But first, Martin, why don't you tell our listeners how they can help the podcast out?
Well, you can help us out by listening like you're doing right now, and you can listen on many different formats, including SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, also Amazon Podcasts and Google Podcasts. And when you're on those formats, when you're there, what we want you to do is rate, subscribe, and comment so that people will get, more people will become aware of this podcast. I think some of you are doing that. We appreciate the ones who are, but more of you should do it and share it with friends.
Right. Sharing is caring. But I also want to hear from you. You can always tweet us. You can get us at CinemATL. And don't forget our Instagram at CinemATL Podcast. And I guarantee you next week we'll be back on track with our regular updates on Mondays and Fridays and all those cool things we do there.
That's awesome. And you can catch us on regular internet at CinemATL.com.
The regular internet.
Just the regular standard,
unleaded
internet. Exactly.
All right, that does it for our nifty little intro. Thanks for sticking with us, but let's get into the meat of the show. All right, well, it's been a while since we've done a technique topic, so let's refresh your memory. We do technique topics occasionally, and the reason they're called that is because we like to examine the different techniques of filmmaking, different aspects of filmmaking. And so this week, we're actually going to be discussing our top 5 tips for making a short film.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, this is just advice from filmmakers. We've made short films. We've made feature films. We've run into problems. We've run into successes. And so, we just have some tips that are in general that we wish we wish the podcast existed when we started and we would have heard us talk about these 5 tips because they really would have been instructional for us. So, with that in mind, any aspiring filmmakers out there, take this with a grain of salt because, we are not telling you what to do. We're just going to give you some advice from our perspective.
Yep. These are just our tips.
That's right. And so the first tip is kind of sound obvious and you've probably heard it, but it bears repeating. You're doing a short film, keep it short. What I mean by that is short films, which, traditional short films, and again, we can talk also about the format of other types of short films. The best format for short films is for them to be short because that's what they're designed for. And if you're talking about short films for film festivals, film festivals like to program short films in blocks. So the shorter your film is, and I'm not talking about 30 seconds, I'm just saying as a manageable, digestible short film can fit into a block with a lot of other short films that the programmer is going to want to program. So if you make that epic short film, and trust me, we've made epic short films, it becomes a little bit harder to program that length. And so that's just kind of, it sounds like it should be obvious, but a lot of people go in and they try to bite off a huge, long short film.
Well, and I believe I think the definition of a short film is less than 40 minutes in most cases. I think most festivals go by kind of something like that, maybe less than 30. Mm-hmm. But, a 40-minute short is, heck, I've seen feature stuff that's only, about an hour long. So it's you're not that far away from a feature at that point. So you might as well, if you're going to go for 40 minutes of a short, you might as well go for a feature at that point. But yeah, I think just in general, like you said, I think the biggest point is, and it kind of, and we'll talk about this tip a little bit later. But it kind of depends on where you're going with your short. If you're trying to get into like a festival or get attention in that way, um, the shorter the better, because like Martin said, they're trying to program blocks, and the shorter your film is, the easier it's going to be for you to fit in a multitude of blocks. So if you've got like a vampire comedy, you might be able to get into the vampire block at the festival, or you might be able to get in the comedy block in the festival. You give the programmer more options, because it's easier for them to stick you in whatever hole they might have, right?
Right, absolutely. And and for people who are very new and don't understand what we say when we talk about a block, when you're at a film festival, the programs are set out in roughly 2 hour sections, right? And so there's a feature films that take up an hour and a half to 2 hours. That type of section is programmable into a block. When you talk about a short film block, it's still 2 hours, but they want to put as much content as they can into that block. And so usually a shorts program will run about an hour and 30 minutes, maybe an hour and 40 minutes, but it'll be several, is depending on,
Right.
the length of each short. So, that's what we mean when we say blocks. But the other thing about short is, think about the attention span, and we'll talk a little bit about this coming up too, is think about the attention span of the viewers, right? Sometimes they have short attention spans, so you want to capture that attention span
Right.
altogether. And so if you keep it short, you have a better chance of doing that, I think.
And honestly, with the rise of online viewing and YouTube and things like that, um, I think just in general, people's audience, their attention spans are getting shorter and shorter anyway. So the quicker you can get in and get out, the better.
And
Um,
yeah, and to put a finer point on that, get in and get out, like a great scene is you get in and get out as fast as you can. And also the great showbiz adage, leave them wanting more.
right. All right. Well, I think that kind of naturally leads us into our second tip, which is know your audience. And in this case, we're talking about, are you going for a festival, accolades? Are you trying to get into a festival? Or are you just trying to make a short to entertain people on YouTube and get hits and, maybe get some ad revenue out of it? Or are you trying to, so there's different ways you can go about making your short, but you really need to hone in on what you are trying to do, because that will advise you on what all these other things that we've talked about already, like the length of your short. If you're going on YouTube, you want it to be hit. You want it to be kind of almost like a one note thing that you're going to grab people's attention. They can share it around and make it viral. So you're really going for a total different group than you would if you're trying to go into a festival or you're trying to show off your filmmaking skills. So that's just like, I think that's the very first thing you should probably think about when you're like, what avenue are you trying to build your audience?
Right, and that also informs style too, because
Right.
there's obviously a big difference between some of the festivals and the short films that appear in film festivals, and the things that are very popular online. So they're a lot different in style, and so knowing your audience that's part of it, is knowing that the style that's going to be acceptable to the format that you're going to choose, and the format that you're targeting. And it's not to say that short films can't do well online, or vice versa, that perhaps some YouTube comment or social media content could possibly do well programmed in a short film festival, depending on the kind of programming they're trying to do. But primarily, I think people understand which is which, and so you need to know that too going into your project, I think.
Right. And it really advises, everything about your project. So this might should have been number one on our tips list, because it does advise how long you're going to make it. It advises what kind of camera you're going to shoot on, because if you're going something on YouTube, you don't necessarily need to be as flashy as you might want to be in a festival. So it also would tell you like, how serious do I need to be about casting and all these other things. Like really, if you're just trying to go for like a joke or a viral type thing, maybe you don't need the best. Maybe you could be acting in it instead of hiring an actor to be in it. So it really does really determine like how you're going to go about making your film. So you really need to know where you're going before you take that first step.
Definitely, definitely. And I think, this may be a good segue into our next tip.
Right.
Just coming off of that is, the third tip we want to say, and this is just back to the artistic piece of making content in short films. Use this to showcase your ability as a filmmaker. Shorts are supposed to be a showpiece for your filmmaking talent, and so keep that in mind. Now, and again, this idea of where the content is going might make a difference. But if we're talking about short films, this is the only reason to make a film is to get an idea across or to showcase your talent. If you want to make a short film, especially if we're talking about short films for festivals, you really need to showcase your talent. You don't just need to make a short film just to make it. The reason to make a short film is to express yourself, but B, especially if you're an aspiring filmmaker, is to showcase the kind of thing you can do,
Right.
even if it's on a short film project, to give a glimpse into what you're capable of long term. And so don't forget that piece, because
Right.
I know a lot of people have checked a box, made a short film just to say they made it, but they never. Some of those projects are never really inspired. They're just kind of done to
Right.
say, "Oh, I've done it." Don't do that. Make this short film a showcase for you as a filmmaker.
Yeah, and I totally agree, and that can mean many different things too. I know we've talked before, and we talk about basic filmmaking and things. I've always kind of like said, you don't need to be flashy, you don't need to have the best camera, you don't need to have the best equipment to make a film, because really, story and telling a story and going from that point of view is really more important than the flashiness. But in this case, on short films, you're right. This is kind of like you showcasing what you can do as a filmmaker. Now, that might not necessarily be using the best equipment, flash equipment, like I said, and
Right,
other
right.
things, but you are showcasing what you can do. So if you are doing something low budget, you want to put together the best low budget film you can do, right? And so you're showcasing your writing talent, or you're showcasing, your concepts or your storylines and things like that. So you're not, showcasing your ability does not mean let's just make a bunch of flashy drone shots and
No,
don't
yeah,
care about story at all.
no,
I mean, some cases that might be what you are very talented at, and in that case, I would advise, yes, highly
yes,
show that, but then
yeah.
also use this as a way to work with somebody else to maybe, get that story out there along with those flashy camera moves and things like that you are so good at. Right.
Well, yeah, and and I'm gonna blow some flowers toward you, Mike, because this is where you really have done this on such low budgets. You've really showcased your talent, your funny chops as a writer, your funny ideas. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
you haven't had giant equipment and drones and things of that nature, but you've made some super quality short films that really showcase your sensibility. And I admire you for that. And that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, is like,
Right.
you know, where, where I've
And thank
seen,
you.
well, I mean, I love you. I love you. But truthfully, you've done that really well with limited resources, and that's the kind of thing that people need to do, is think about the
Mhm.
resources they have and the kind of story they can tell with that resource that showcases sort of their voice. Because this is really more, when we talk about your ability, we're also talking about your voice as a filmmaker.
Right.
And so there are ways to do it without heavy equipment and things of that nature. So that's what we're saying, is that this is the most important thing about making a short film, is to give that showcase, and also to connect with people, obviously.
Well,
But
I mean, and that could be what you're showcasing too, is how you connect with people, right? So if you're a
mhm,
documentary filmmaker and you're making a documentary short, you're displaying your ability to connect emotionally at this level because you're basically, this is your calling card. If you're going the route of, trying to get to a festival and just get noticed in general, your ultimate goal is to gain the trust of industry professionals so that you can create more content, and you're basically showing like why they should hire you.
Absolutely. And the way you show it the best is when you connect with that audience. So whatever means necessary, but it has to be a showcase. Because I think my main thing when I came up with this tip is I've seen so many people who like put together a so-called short film, which is just sort of like a couple of a couple of scenes that they slapdash together and said, oh, we got a short film.
Right.
No, that is not a short film. That's a couple of scenes you slap together.
Right.
You really need to tell a full story with this short film, and the best way you can do it, no matter what the equipment is, and that's what I mean by showcasing your ability.
Right. Okay, well, that leads us to tip number 4, which is hook your viewers. Unlike features, shorts, you have to get right to the point. You can't be spending a lot of time setting up, things that you could do in a feature. Now, features, they also say you should be hooking your viewers by page. If you're writing a screenplay, it's like page 10. You should be people should know where you're going with the film. But you take that from a 100-page script to a 10-page script, you're going to want to hook your viewers right away, your very first page. So when you're thinking about writing your script for a short film, think about how you can get right into it and hook those people in. You don't have to give away the story, but you have to find a way to immediately engage your audience. And especially if you're trying to aim for digital distribution on YouTube and things like that, people are ready to go to the next video.
Right. No,
away,
totally. Totally. I mean, that's the analytics. I mean, that's literally the analytics of YouTube is like the view time, right?
Right.
And so if your view time is not optimal, they're not going to recommend your video to other viewers. Mm-hmm. And so that's why you have to hook them early and keep them watching for the online, especially the online content. And if you do that and your numbers, are good in that metric, then that's what makes a video go viral, is that people are watching it and it gets recommended by the algorithm, and then the algorithm spreads it everywhere. And so again, the key.
You mean algorithm, like Don Cheadle?
Yeah, Don Cheadle. Don Cheadle. If you put Don Cheadle in your short, I think you'll do
that
well.
Should be our 5th tip. Put Don Cheadle in your short. But sorry, that was a bad Space Jam joke. Sorry. Keep going.
No. But I'm just saying, the point is, this hook part is so important, especially in that space. But even in a film festival space where you're trying to get programmed, is that we've both done this. We've both screened for film festivals, and it's really a tough job to get through all that content. So if you're not hooked early, you may not watch the whole thing.
Yeah, the screeners have just as much fatigue as somebody watching videos on YouTube, right? After a while, you get to a point of diminishing returns. So if you don't have that, if you don't have that thing that makes them want to sit up and pay attention to your movie, they might just, skip past it. So that goes to, festival programmers as well as YouTube audience. So.
And also goes back to your audience, because we just talked about the whole point is to connect with an audience, and if you don't hook them and keep them watching, you haven't connected with them. That's just the truth.
Yeah, and I will say, we've made this mistake when we first started, is having like a long credit sequence at the beginning of your movie. It's like,
yes,
nobody's got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
I can't tell you how many times people have sent me, something, and they're like, "Oh, this is my thing that I just finished," or like I see it on on Facebook groups and stuff like that. Check out my new short, and then I'm at work and I want to check it out. I want to be supportive, but then I start their thing, and it's like starts out with 2 minutes of credits, and I'm just like, okay, I don't have time for this. I can't. I don't.
And the funny thing is, though, I understand the impulse, because especially early on, when you're first doing this, and you're you're coming from, you love movies, right? And so,
Right.
movies often start with long credit
Right.
sequences, right? So you want to, and I've seen many
Yeah.
a short that have a wonderful credit sequence, but haven't seen the rest of the short.
Right, right. Well, I've also seen films that have wonderful credit sequence, and then then as soon as the dialogue starts and the sound is awful and
Right,
the
right,
blocking's bad, it's like, oh, okay, I'm stopping
right.
now. But
Absolutely,
yeah, no.
absolutely.
To go back to the point, do not do that. And yeah, we all want to emulate the big Hollywood movies. Start with a logo with the you
Yeah,
know
yeah,
the
absolutely.
quiet silence behind it and fade into the
Right,
you know. A Martin
but you,
Kelley picture starring blah blah blah. You don't do that.
don't do that. Yes.
All right, that was number 4. What do we got for number 5?
So number 5, this is a practical thing for. I'm going to take this to sort of, very simple tip, but then there's a lot of reasons behind it. My tip is limited locations. And what
Right,
I mean by that is the production, especially early on, if this is your first short, you know, you it's going to be a challenge to get it done. I don't care if it's a 5-minute piece or if it's a 15-minute piece. It's going to be a challenge. And so the more locations that you have, the more production challenges you have. And if it's your first time, the odds are it makes it even harder to
right,
finish. Like you know, when you're doing it early on and you have no resources and you're getting volunteers, if you put a 20 location short film together, how many days do you think you're going to have to shoot on that,
right.
right? And then how many people are going to last that many days, right? And it's just you may not get the same consistency because you'll have people dropping off the project and what have you,
Hmm.
or you may never finish it because you don't have the time. You're not doing it 20. You don't have 20 days to shoot a short film, right? So if the more limited the production, you know, locations, then the more achievable it is. And so that's one thing without compromising artistic value.
Uh,
But I
that's
do
what I was
say,
gonna say.
yeah, I
I was
do,
gonna, yeah,
I do say you need to seriously try to limit locations if possible.
totally agree. And yeah, what my caveat was going to be. That does not mean turn one room in your house into a doctor's office and a classroom, and you know what I mean. Like,
Right, right, right,
you still need to pay attention to production design and making sure that things look good and aren't just obviously stand-ins for other places.
right,
I can't
right.
tell you how many times I've seen movies where somebody walks into an office building. You see an outdoor shot of an office building, and they walk in, and you can tell it's obviously somebody's home office, and you're just like,
Right, right.
this is, you got to make
Totally.
it. You got to make it work. Now we're all limited by budgets and everything like that, but yes, I would say if you need to change the script to fit
Right.
where you have locations for, and if you feel like you really need a location, make sure it is an accurate portrayal of that location, and maybe you spend more money to get that location and then get rid of some other minor locations more than that, right? So, uh,
Totally. No, yeah, I don't advocate. I don't advocate for you. Trying to sell one room for several locations. That's not what I mean by limited
right,
locations. I'm
right,
talking about the fact that you need to design the short around limited locations that you can get access to, and that can be believable. And the main reason is, again, I've seen the people who have started projects who've never finished projects, and these were shorts.
right,
Like they never finished a short because they were too ambitious with what they wanted to do. And so I think it's great to be ambitious, but it's also great to finish a short film.
right, definitely. Well, all right. I mean, that does it for our top 5 tips for short filmmakers. Let's go over them again. At number 1, we had keep it short. 2, know your audience. 3, showcase your ability. 4, hook your viewers. And 5, limit locations. Anything else to add before we wrap it up, Martin, on this technique topic?
Yeah, here's just something, especially if you're early on, have fun. Make sure you're having fun, and make sure everyone involved is having fun and feel valued,
Right.
just so that everyone's going to want to keep doing it. And so, that's that's the sort of intangible thing that you got to do. Like all these others are like practical tips, but that one is really important because, I hate to see people sour on the experience early on if they're not having fun.
True, true. And, if you haven't already, check out a previous podcast that we did a couple months ago now. I think it was a technique topic on first-time filmmaker FAQs. If you're a first-time filmmaker, we talked a lot about things.
Even more technical, yeah,
right,
exactly.
yeah, things that we didn't go into as much detail here. If you really are a first-time filmmaker, you might want to check out that FAQ as well, and we'll link it in the description of this episode. All right, we're gonna wrap it up. Keep it short and sweet, like they say. Get in, get out. Right.
That's right.
We want to thank Eureka Failure, as we do every week, for providing the music for this podcast. We really appreciate it. Check them out at eurekafailure.bandcamp.com or on Spotify or anywhere you listen to music. Also, I want to remind you that sharing is caring, and if you could share this podcast with your friends and family, we'd really appreciate it. It would help us out a lot. And other than that, Martin, share with us your almighty words of wisdom. Bestow upon us.
Well, I've been doing a lot of quotes from men lately. Some good quotes from men. But here's a quote from a woman, and it's still in the same vein as some of the things that I like to talk about. But Amelia Earhart said, "A single act of kindness throws out roots in all directions, and the roots spring up and make new trees." And so I think that's a great idea. That if we could just plant trees of kindness out there, everything would improve dramatically.
The roots are on fire. Sorry. That's all I think I got out of that. No, I agree with you. That's good. Good point. Roots of kindness. Trees of kindness. Is that right?
Forest. Let's create a forest of kindness.
Forest. Yeah. Yes. Anyway, we'll talk to you again next time on the CinemATL Podcast. We hope you had a good one, and see you then. Bye.